The council chamber stretched wide enough to hold a small city, and Kate Morrison sat at the very back of it all. She had been Earth's ambassador for 15 years now, and every single one of those years had taught her the same lesson over and over again. Humanity did not matter to these people. The Galactic Council met once every lunar cycle to discuss matters that affected trillions of beings across hundreds of star systems, but the humans always sat in the cheap seats where the lighting barely reached and the sound system crackled with interference. Ryan Blake sat to her left, and the commander had his arms crossed over his chest in that way he did when he was trying very hard not to say something he would regret later. On her right side sat Linda Hayes, and the scientist was reviewing data on her tablet with quick, nervous movements of her fingers. They had come prepared today with charts and statistics and careful arguments about why humanity deserved better treatment. Kate already knew none of it would matter. The chamber held representatives from over 300 species, and most of them paid no attention to the humans at all. The Vryn dominated the center of the room as they always did. They looked like Earth lizards if Earth lizards stood 8 feet tall and wore enough jewelry to buy a small planet. Their leader Cax then was speaking now about new regulations, and his voice boomed through the translation system with absolute confidence. Humanity would be restricted from the outer reach sectors effective immediately. Human trade would require Vryn approval for all transactions over a certain threshold. Human technology would need inspection and certification before it could be sold or distributed. Kate felt Ryan tense beside her, but she put a hand on his arm to keep him still. She wanted to hear all of it before she made her move. Linda had stopped looking at her tablet and was staring at the Vryn with an expression of pure disbelief. The regulations Cax then described would essentially make humans into second-class citizens across half the galaxy. They would need permission to do business and permission to travel, and permission to settle new worlds. Everything would flow through Vryn bureaucracy and Vryn officials who had made it very clear over the years that they considered humans to be useful, but ultimately inferior. High Arbiter. Zelnoth floated at the head of the chamber in his containment sphere. He looked like a jellyfish made of light, and his species had run the council for the past 1,000 years. He did not even glance in Kate's direction before calling for a vote on the Vryn proposal. The voting board lit up with colors that represented different choices. Green for yes and red for no and yellow for abstaining. Kate watched as green lights flooded the board like a wave. 300 species voted to approve the restrictions. 12 voted to abstain. Not a single red light appeared. Kate stood up slowly and began gathering her things. Ryan looked at her with confusion, and Linda whispered something urgent, but Kate ignored them both. She picked up her tablet and her data pad, and the small wooden box that held her credentials as Earth's official representative. The box had been carved from oak that grew in the park where she had played as a child, and she had carried it to every council meeting for 15 years. She tucked it under her arm and started walking toward the exit. Ryan and Linda scrambled to follow her, and their footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet that had fallen over the chamber. Zelnoth's translator clicked on with a burst of static. Ambassador Morrison, the vote is concluded. You may submit a formal protest through the proper channels if you wish to contest the results. Kate stopped walking, but she did not turn around. She stood there for a long moment looking at the massive doors that led out of the chamber. Behind her, she could feel 300 species watching and waiting to see what the human would do. They expected her to bow her head and accept the decision. They expected her to file the paperwork and follow the rules and continue sitting in the back of the room for another 15 years while they made more decisions about humanity's place in their galaxy. She turned around, and her voice carried across the chamber without needing any amplification. There will be no protest. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. We are done here. The silence that followed felt like something physical. Kate could see confusion on the faces nearest to her and curiosity on others. Zelnoth's sphere bobbed in what might have been surprise. Ambassador Morrison, perhaps you should take time to consider this decision. The regulations can be discussed further in committee. Kate smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. We have taken 15 years to consider it. We have sat in the back of this chamber and watched you make decisions about us without us. We have contributed our technology and our medical advances and our labor to this council. We cured the Krolic plague that killed millions of your people. We designed the quantum communication system that you all use every day. We patrol trade routes and stop pirates and ask for nothing but basic respect in return. You have made it clear that respect will never come. Cax then rose from his seat and his scales glittered under the chamber lights. The humans are overreacting. These regulations are for the good of galactic stability. Your species is young and impulsive. You need guidance. Kate looked at the Vryn and felt a calm settle over her that came from finally making a decision she should have made years ago. We do not need your guidance. We do not need your permission. We do not need you at all. Humanity will return to our own space and focus on our own development. You can keep your regulations and your committees and your proper channels. She turned back toward the doors, and this time she did not stop walking. Ryan and Linda followed close behind her, and their footsteps sounded loud in the absolute silence of the chamber. No one tried to stop them. No one called out with offers to negotiate. The three humans walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, and the massive doors closed behind them with a boom that echoed like thunder. Outside in the corridor, Kate let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Ryan looked at her with wide eyes. Did we just do what I think we just did? Kate nodded and tucked the wooden box more securely under her arm. We just left the galaxy to figure out what happens when humans stop doing all the work nobody else wants to do. Linda was pale, but there was something like satisfaction in her expression. They are going to panic when they realize how much they relied on us. Kate started walking toward the docking bay where their shuttle waited. Let them panic. We gave them 15 years to treat us like equals. Now they can learn what it means to lose us entirely. The three humans walked through the station that orbited a dead star at the center of galactic space. Around them, hundreds of species went about their business completely unaware that everything was about to change. Humanity had left the talks, and soon enough the galaxy would understand what that really meant. 6 months had passed since Kate Morrison walked out of the council chambers, and the galaxy was starting to notice that something had gone very wrong. The news networks had treated humanity's departure as a minor story at first. One small species throwing a tantrum would not affect the grand machinery of galactic civilization. They were wrong about that. Nicole Grant sat in the captain's chair of the Spirit of New York and watched the recall order flash across her screen for the third time that morning. She had been hauling medical supplies to the Theta colonies when the message came through. All human vessels were to return to Earth or the nearest human-controlled system immediately. No exceptions and no delays. She looked at the cargo hold readings and thought about the medicine sitting in her ship. The Theta colonies needed those supplies to fight off a bacterial outbreak that was killing their children. She thought about it for exactly 5 seconds before plotting a course back to Earth. The colonies would have to find another supplier, and good luck with that, because human cargo ships had been the backbone of galactic trade for over a decade. Nicole knew the statistics because she had helped write the reports that the Council ignored. Human vessels carried 40% of all medical supplies in the galaxy. They transported food and equipment and raw materials across distances that other species found unprofitable or too dangerous. The humans did it because they were good at it, and because they believed in helping people even when those people did not appreciate the help. President Andrew Cole stood before the Terran Parliament, and the chamber was packed with representatives from every human colony and settlement. The vote had been called and the results were already certain, but he gave the speech anyway because some moments needed to be marked with words. Humanity would turn inward and focus on building their own civilization without interference from species who had made it clear that humans were only valuable as workers and nothing more. The Parliament voted unanimously to support the withdrawal. Every single representative agreed that 15 years of disrespect was enough. On the Vryn homeworld, Cax then sat in his office and reviewed economic reports that made less sense each day. Trade revenue was down 18% and the decline was accelerating. His advisors tried to explain it with charts and projections, but the truth was simple enough that even Cax then could see it. Humans had been everywhere in the galactic economy, and now they were nowhere. The gaps they left behind were bigger than anyone had predicted. He gave an interview to one of the major news networks and tried to project confidence. The humans were useful laborers, but they were nothing special. The Vryn would find replacements and everything would return to normal within a few months. Everything did not return to normal. The Galactic Trade Network started experiencing failures that grew worse each week. Routes that used to take 3 days now took 3 weeks. Ships collided in transit corridors because the navigation algorithms were degrading without maintenance. The system had been designed by a team of human programmers led by a man named Peter Walsh, who worked at the Lunar Institute. The code was elegant and efficient, and it had been running smoothly for 12 years. Now it was falling apart, because no one else understood how it worked well enough to fix it. The Krolik plague had been eradicated 5 years ago by a human doctor named Michelle Torres. She had spent 18 months developing a cure that worked across multiple species because their biology was so different. The cure had saved millions of lives, and Michelle had shared her research freely with every medical institution in the galaxy. Now a new strain of the plague had emerged on the rim worlds and was spreading fast. The Galactic Medical Consortium sent urgent requests to Earth asking for help. They received automated responses that all said the same thing. Humanity is no longer affiliated with galactic institutions. Please direct your inquiries elsewhere. Jake Sullivan commanded the engineering teams that were dismantling the quantum relay stations throughout the Orion Arm. The relays had been built by humans using human resources and human expertise. If the galaxy did not want humans in their space, then they did not get to keep the tools humans had provided. Each relay took a week to safely dismantle and transport. Jake's teams worked methodically and carefully. They documented everything and made sure no damage was done to surrounding infrastructure. They were professionals even when being professional meant taking away things that the galaxy desperately needed. The council called emergency sessions almost every day now. Zelnoth floated in his sphere and tried to maintain order while representatives from 300 species shouted at each other. The Thanari Union was facing economic collapse. The Deneb colonies were dealing with the new plague strain without any hope of a cure. Pirate attacks had increased by 200% because human patrol ships were no longer protecting the trade lanes. Every species had a crisis, and every crisis somehow traced back to something humans had been doing that no one had noticed until they stopped doing. Zelnoth proposed sending a diplomatic mission to Earth to negotiate humanity's return. The vote passed easily because even the species who had voted for the restrictions were getting worried now. A delegation of 50 ambassadors made the journey to the Sol system and requested permission to enter human space. They were stopped at the border by a defense platform that politely informed them that Earth was not receiving diplomatic visitors at this time. The ambassadors sent messages and filed requests and made speeches about the importance of dialogue. Every message received the same automated response. Humanity has withdrawn from galactic affairs. Please respect our decision. Kate Morrison had retired to a small ranch in Colorado, where the air was clean and the sky was blue. She ignored the thousands of messages that filled her communication system every day. Former colleagues and council members and random aliens she had never met all wanted to talk to her. They wanted her to convince Earth to change its mind. They wanted her to explain how to fix the systems that humans had built. They wanted her to make the problems go away. Kate deleted the messages without reading them and spent her days riding horses and watching the sunset over the mountains. Lisa Monroe commanded a destroyer that had spent the past 8 years patrolling the Sagittarius sector. She had stopped more pirate raids than she could count and had coordinated with local defense forces to keep the trade lanes safe. Now her ship was stationed at the edge of human space, and her orders were simple: defend human territory and nothing else. She watched the reports coming in from the sectors she used to patrol. Merchant vessels being attacked and cargo being stolen, and civilians dying because no one was protecting them anymore. It made her angry, but her orders were clear and she followed them. The news networks ran constant coverage of what they were calling the human crisis. Analysts tried to explain how one species leaving could cause so much damage. A Centauri political expert named Vexmore gave an interview that went viral across every network. We thought the humans were sitting at our table. We did not realize we were sitting at theirs. The quote was repeated everywhere and became a symbol of how badly the council had miscalculated. Henry Shaw agreed to give one interview from his laboratory on Titan. He had led the team that developed the universal translation protocols that allowed all the different species to communicate. The protocols were starting to fail now because they needed constant updates to account for new languages and dialects. Henry sat in front of the camera and chose his words carefully. We shared everything we created freely because we wanted to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We wanted to be partners in building a better galaxy. The council made it clear that they saw us as servants and not partners. Now they have neither servants nor partners. They have nothing from us at all. The council sent another delegation, and this time they made it past the border. President Cole agreed to meet with them in Geneva, along with Kate Morrison, who came out of retirement for this one meeting. Zelnoth arrived with representatives from 50 major powers. They brought apologies and offers. Humanity could have full council membership with voting rights. Humans could settle anywhere they wanted. Human technology would be exempt from regulations. Trade agreements would favor human interests. Everything that had been denied for 15 years was suddenly on the table. Kate listened to all of it and then asked one question. "Do you understand why we left?" The ambassadors looked at each other and started talking about misunderstandings and cultural differences, and the need for better communication. Kate let them talk for 10 minutes before she stood up and walked out of the room. President Cole followed her, and the meeting ended without any agreement. The delegation returned to the council and reported their failure. Humanity was not coming back. 1 year after humanity walked away from the council and the galaxy was burning, not with fire, but with the slow collapse of everything that people had taken for granted. The Thanari Union fell first, and their collapse sent shockwaves through a dozen neighboring systems. Their economy had been built on asteroid mining, and the mining operations depended on gravity stabilizers that kept the asteroids from breaking apart during extraction. A human engineer named Stephen Park had designed those stabilizers and had maintained them for 8 years. When the humans left, Stephen went with them, and the Thanari did not know how to fix the machines when they started failing. 3 major mining facilities suffered catastrophic failures within the same month. The asteroids broke apart while workers were still inside them. Thousands died in the vacuum of space, and the Thanari economy died with them. Other species that depended on Thanari minerals suddenly had no supplies. Manufacturing ground to a halt across 17 star systems. The council held emergency sessions and authorized aid packages, but the money did not solve the fundamental problem. No one knew how to build new stabilizers or fix the old ones. That knowledge had walked out of the galaxy with the humans. The pirate raids got worse every week, and Captain Lisa Monroe watched it happen from her position at the edge of human space. Her sensors picked up distress calls from merchant ships that were being attacked in sectors she used to patrol. The pirates had figured out that no one was coming to stop them anymore. Human ships had been the primary anti-piracy force in the Sagittarius sector, and the Orion Arm and half a dozen other regions. They had done it quietly, without much recognition, because they believed it was the right thing to do. Now they were gone, and the pirates ran free. A Vryn merchant convoy was hit just outside the Kepler system. 15 ships carrying food and medicine were boarded and stripped of everything valuable. The crews were left alive but stranded in dead ships with no power and no communications. It took 3 days before anyone found them. 24 people died from exposure before rescue arrived. The news network showed footage of the survivors, and everyone across the galaxy saw what happened when humans stopped protecting the trade lanes. Cax then was removed from his position in disgrace. The Vryn economy had contracted by 30%, and the people were angry. They wanted someone to blame, and Cax then had been the one who laughed about humans leaving. The council created a new anti-piracy task force and put together ships from 20 different species. The task force lasted 6 weeks before falling apart completely. No one could agree on tactics or command structure. The different species had different ideas about how to fight pirates, and no one wanted to take orders from anyone else. Human commanders like Lisa Monroe had been the glue holding these coalitions together. They had learned to work with every species and had found ways to make cooperation possible. Without them, the task force dissolved into arguments and recriminations. On Mars, General Carl Foster reviewed intelligence reports that made him smile in a way that did not reach his eyes. 3 different species were making plans for military action against human space. They wanted to force humanity back to the negotiating table by threatening Earth itself. Carl had been preparing for this possibility since the day Kate Morrison walked out of the council. Human defense forces had spent the past year upgrading every weapon system and fortifying every border. They had learned from every species in the galaxy, and had improved on everything they learned. If someone wanted to start a war, they would discover that humans were very good at war. The galactic news networks ran analysis programs every night trying to explain what had gone wrong. A Centauri journalist named Vexmore became famous for her commentary on the crisis. She spoke clearly and without the usual political double talk. We built our civilization on the assumption that some species existed to serve others. The humans were supposed to do the difficult work while we made the important decisions. We never asked ourselves what would happen if they refused. Now we know the answer, and it is destroying us. Henry Shaw gave another interview from his laboratory on Titan. He looked older than he had a year ago and tired in a way that went deeper than just lack of sleep. The universal translation protocols were failing across the galaxy, and species could no longer communicate effectively with each other. Misunderstandings led to arguments, and arguments led to conflicts. Henry explained it all in simple terms that anyone could understand. We designed the protocols to adapt and grow as new languages developed. That requires constant monitoring and updating. No one else learned how to do that work because everyone assumed we would always be there to do it. They were wrong. Laura Bennett was a scientist who specialized in terraforming technology. She had spent 12 years helping other species transform dead worlds into living planets. Human techniques were more efficient and less damaging to local ecosystems than anything else in the galaxy. Now those projects were failing because the people running them did not understand the underlying principles. Laura watched reports of 3 different terraforming disasters where entire biospheres collapsed because someone made a mistake that no human engineer would have made. Millions of colonists had to be evacuated. Decades of work were lost. Chris Dalton taught philosophy at the University of Luna. He had written extensively about humanity's place in galactic society and had argued for years that the Council's hierarchy was unsustainable. Now he was being proven right in the worst possible way. Students from other species who had been studying on human worlds started returning home because their governments could no longer afford to send them. Educational exchange programs that had fostered understanding between cultures collapsed. The galaxy was becoming more isolated and more suspicious as communication broke down and cooperation failed. The council chambers looked different now. Half the seats were empty because some species had stopped sending representatives. There was no point in attending meetings where nothing got accomplished. Zelnoth floated in his sphere and tried to maintain order, but his authority was crumbling. The council had been held together by the belief that it served everyone's interests. That belief was dead now. Species were forming their own alliances and making their own rules. The carefully constructed system of galactic governance was coming apart. President Cole received another delegation in Geneva. This time they came with genuine desperation instead of arrogance. Zelnoth was there again along with Kate Morrison, who had agreed to attend after much persuasion. The ambassadors did not make offers this time. They begged. The galaxy was dying, and everyone knew that only humans could save it. They admitted everything. They had been wrong to treat humanity as inferior. They had been wrong to dismiss human contributions. They had been wrong about everything. Please come back. Please help us. Please save us from the consequences of our own stupidity. Kate looked at the ambassadors and saw the same faces that had voted to restrict human rights just 1 year ago. She saw the same species that had laughed when humanity left. Now they were terrified and desperate and finally willing to admit the truth. She let the silence stretch for a long moment before she spoke. You want us to fix your problems. You want us to go back to doing all the work that keeps your civilization running. You want everything to go back to the way it was before. The ambassadors nodded eagerly. Yes, exactly. We will give you anything you want. Full council membership and voting rights and protection guarantees. Humans can settle anywhere and trade freely. We will write it all into law and make it permanent. Just please help us. Kate shook her head slowly. You still do not understand. We do not want your permission to exist. We do not want to be granted rights as if they are gifts you can give or take away. We want fundamental change in how the galaxy operates. Every species must be treated as equal, regardless of their size or power or economic contribution. The council must be rebuilt from the ground up with real representation for everyone. Until that happens, humanity stays home. The ambassadors tried to argue, but Kate stood up and left the room. President Cole followed her, and once again the meeting ended with no agreement. The delegation returned to report another failure. Zelnoth called for an emergency vote on restructuring the council. The debate lasted for 3 days, and the vote was close. Some species wanted to maintain their power and privilege. Others were desperate enough to try anything. In the end, desperation won. The council voted to dissolve itself and create a new system based on true equality. Every species would have one vote regardless of their military strength or economic power. The age of hierarchy was over. The news spread across the galaxy in hours. Some celebrated and others protested, but everyone understood that everything had changed. Humanity had forced the greatest political transformation in galactic history by the simple act of walking away. Now the question was whether they would come back to see what they had created. 18 months after humanity left the Council, and something new appeared at the edge of known space. The first colony to die was on a world called Terminus 7 in the Outer Reach. The population was 12 million, and they sent one distress call before going silent. When the rescue ships arrived 3 days later, they found a dead world. Everything organic was gone. The buildings stood empty and the machines still ran, but every living thing had vanished. The crews that investigated found residue that looked like ash but tested as biological matter that had been broken down to its basic components. The second colony died 4 days later. Then a third and a fourth. Whatever was killing these worlds moved fast and left nothing alive behind it. The Galactic Defense Force mobilized and sent a fleet to intercept the threat. Admiral Thorne commanded 200 warships from a dozen different species. He was confident because the Defense Force had protected the galaxy for 3 centuries. They had fought pirates and rebels in territorial disputes. They had never lost a major engagement. That record ended at the Battle of Nexus Point. The enemy did not negotiate or communicate. They simply attacked. The Defense Force called them the Devourers because they consumed everything in their path. They looked like ships but moved like a swarm of insects. Thousands of small craft that acted with perfect coordination. Admiral Thorne used standard tactics that had worked for 300 years. Overwhelming firepower concentrated on key targets. Shield walls to protect the larger vessels. Fighter screens to intercept incoming threats. The Devourers adapted to everything within minutes. They learned the frequency of the shields and passed right through them. They predicted the firing patterns and avoided the weapons. They surrounded the Defense Force fleet and tore it apart ship by ship. Admiral Thorne died with most of his command. Only 30 ships escaped to report what happened. The news hit the galaxy like a physical blow. The Devourers were not just another threat. They were something that could not be fought with conventional methods. They learned and adapted faster than any species could counter. Every battle made them stronger because they absorbed the tactics used against them. The Vryn lost an entire armada when they tried to stop the Devourers at the Kepler defensive line. 500 ships went in and less than 20 came back. Panic spread faster than the Devourers themselves. Refugees fled from the Outer Reach toward the core systems. Governments hoarded resources and closed borders. The council chambers became chaos as ambassadors screamed at each other. Some wanted to surrender. Others wanted to fight to the last. No one had any idea how to actually stop the enemy. The Devourers did not want territory or resources in the way other conquerors did. They wanted to consume all biological life, and they were very good at it. Rachel Green stood on the bridge of the Defiant and watched the reports coming in from the front lines. She commanded the largest human warship in the fleet, and her orders were to defend the Sol system. Nothing else mattered. The galaxy could burn as long as Earth survived. She had fought in the Titan Wars 30 years ago, and had seen what happened. And when people let emotion override strategy, the humans would stay neutral and let the other species deal with the consequences of their choices. The call came through official channels on a Tuesday morning. Not a request for humanity to rejoin the Council, but a simple plea for help. The galaxy was dying and only humans had any chance of stopping it. The message was broadcast across every human world and colony. Everyone could read it and see the raw desperation in every word. We were wrong. We treated you badly. We disrespected everything you did for us. Now we are facing extinction and we are begging you to save us anyway. Not because we deserve it, but because you are better than we ever were. President Cole called an emergency meeting of the cabinet and the argument started immediately. General Foster slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make coffee cups jump. Let them face the consequences. They wanted us gone and now they have what they wanted. We owe them nothing. Half the cabinet agreed with him. Humanity had been insulted and dismissed for 15 years. Why should they risk human lives to save species that had never shown them any respect? Kate Morrison spoke quietly, but everyone stopped to listen when she did. We did not leave because we wanted the galaxy to burn. We left because they needed to understand our value. They understand now. The question is what kind of species we want to be. Do we help only when it benefits us, or do we help because it is right? Laura Bennett nodded in agreement. The Devourers will not stop at the borders of Council space. Eventually they will come for us too. Better to fight them now with whatever allies we can find than wait and fight them alone later. Chris Dalton added his perspective from the viewpoint of someone who studied how civilizations rose and fell. This is the moment that defines us. Every species in the galaxy is watching to see what humans do. We can prove that we are petty and vengeful, or we can prove that we are better than the people who wronged us. That choice will echo through history for 1,000 years. The debate went on for 3 days and spread beyond the cabinet to every human settlement. Town halls were held on Earth and Mars and Titan and Europa. Colonial governors argued with their populations. Families debated around dinner tables. Humanity had to decide together because this decision affected everyone. The vote was close, but the result was clear. 52% voted to help. 48% wanted to stay neutral. It was not an overwhelming mandate, but it was enough. President Cole addressed the human worlds on the 4th day. We will help defend the galaxy, but we do it on our terms. Human forces will coordinate with other species, but not serve under their command. We share our technology and tactics freely, but we expect the same in return. We fight as equals, or we do not fight at all. Any species that wants human help must accept the new council structure that treats all species as equals. No more hierarchy, no more special privileges for the powerful. Those are our conditions, and they are not negotiable. The response came within hours. Every major species agreed to the terms. They were desperate enough to accept anything. Zelnoth personally guaranteed that the council reforms would be implemented immediately. Kate Morrison came out of retirement one more time to verify the agreements. She read every word of every document and made sure there were no loopholes or escape clauses. When she was satisfied, she gave President Cole a single nod. Daniel Cruz commanded the first human fleet to leave Sol system in 18 months. 40 ships led by the Defiant with Rachel Green as overall commander. They did not head for the council chambers or the core worlds. They went straight to the front lines where the Devourers were pushing deeper into inhabited space. The Kepler system was surrounded and would fall within days. 14 billion people lived on 6 different worlds in that system. The defense force was gone and local. Militias were all that stood between the Devourers and complete annihilation. The human fleet arrived at the edge of the Kepler system and immediately detected the Devourer swarm. Thousands of enemy ships surrounded the inner planets. Daniel opened a channel to Rachel and spoke calmly despite what they were facing. This is going to be ugly. We are outnumbered 50-1 and fighting an enemy that adapts to everything. I hope somebody back home knows what they are doing. Rachel smiled, and it was the expression of someone who had been waiting for this fight. Somebody back home always knows what they are doing. That is why we are humans. All ships prepare for combat. Let us show the galaxy what they have been missing. The Battle of Kepler 9 began at dawn on the 6th planet and would be remembered for the next 1,000 years as the day everything changed. Rachel Green watched the tactical display as 40 human ships faced a swarm of thousands. The Devourers moved toward them in patterns that looked random but contained a terrible intelligence. They had destroyed every fleet sent against them by learning and adapting faster than any defense could counter. Rachel had studied every battle report and every scrap of data about the enemy. She thought she understood what made them dangerous. Now she would find out if she was right. Daniel Cruz commanded the forward elements and gave the first order. All ships break formation and engage at will. Do not follow standard patterns. Make them guess what we are doing. The human fleet scattered in a dozen different directions, and the Devourers paused for just a moment as if confused. That pause lasted 3 seconds. Then they adapted and rushed forward to engage. The first volleys came from human railguns that fired solid projectiles at incredible speeds. The Devourers had learned to defend against energy weapons by adapting their hulls to absorb and redirect the beams. Solid metal moving at a fraction of light speed was something different. Dozens of Devourer ships shattered on impact. The swarm adjusted immediately and began evasive maneuvers. Rachel smiled because that was exactly what she wanted them to do. While they dodged railgun fire, the human ships deployed mines that drifted silently through space. The mines did not explode. They broadcast signals on frequencies that Sophie Carter had calculated would disrupt hive mind communications. Sophie sat in a lab on the Defiant and monitored the results of her resonance weapons. She had spent 6 months developing technology specifically designed to fight enemies that shared a collective intelligence. The theory was simple, but the execution had taken every bit of knowledge she had. The Devourers communicated through quantum entanglement across their entire swarm. If you could introduce interference into that network, you could break their coordination. The mine started broadcasting and the Devourer swarm suddenly lost its perfect unity. Ships collided with each other. Formations broke apart. For 30 seconds, they were vulnerable. Human fighters screamed through the gaps and launched missiles that used multiple guidance systems. The Devourers adapted to one system and the missiles switched to another. They adapted again and the missiles switched again. Each missile had 5 different ways to find its target, and the enemy could not counter all of them fast enough. Explosions lit up the darkness as hundreds of Devourer ships died, but there were thousands more and they were learning from every exchange. Rachel watched the battle develop and gave rapid orders. The human ships moved in patterns that seemed chaotic, but followed principles from Earth's ancient history. Sun Tzu and Clausewitz and a dozen other military thinkers who had never imagined space warfare, but understood the fundamental nature of conflict. Appear weak when you are strong. Attack where the enemy is not. Make noise in the east and strike in the west. The Devourers had centuries of galactic military doctrine to learn from. They had never encountered human thinking. Down on Kepler-9's main colony, Kevin Torres led a combined force of human marines and local defenders against Devourer ground forces. The enemy had landed while the space battle raged above. They moved like locusts, consuming everything organic in their path. Kevin had 3,000 troops against an enemy that numbered in the tens of thousands. Standard military doctrine said to establish a defensive perimeter and hold territory. Kevin ignored standard doctrine completely. His forces split into dozens of small teams that harassed the enemy and then retreated before they could be surrounded. They used the terrain and the buildings and every advantage they could find. They led the Devourers into ambushes and kill zones and then melted away before the enemy could adapt. The Devourers were designed to overwhelm defenders with numbers and consumption. They had no experience with an enemy that refused to stand and fight. Kevin had studied guerrilla warfare from every era of human history. The Devourers learned fast, but humans had thousands of years of painful experience to draw from. The space battle lasted 6 days, and the tide turned slowly in humanity's favor. Every time the Devourers adapted to one tactic, the humans switched to something different. They used lasers and missiles and railguns and mines. They attacked from above and below and straight ahead. They coordinated with the local defense forces who learned quickly when humans showed them how to fight. On the 4th day, reinforcements arrived from 3 other species who had been watching the BA. Tull. They followed human commands without question, because everyone could see that human tactics worked. Sophie broadcast a new frequency that caused a cascade failure in the Devourer network. The swarm lost coordination completely for almost 5 minutes. In that time, the combined fleet destroyed over 2,000 enemy ships. The Devourers tried to adapt, but they were fighting on too many fronts with too many different threats. Their strength had always been their ability to learn from combat. Humans made sure every combat was different enough that previous learning did not apply. On the ground, Kevin's forces linked up with civilian resistance fighters who had learned to fight by watching the Marines. Together, they drove the Devourers back to their landing sites. The enemy tried to dig in and hold territory, but humans had spent 10,000 years learning how to break defensive positions. They used explosives and fire and tactics that no galactic species had ever considered. By the 6th day, the ground forces were contained and being systematically eliminated. The Devourer swarm broke on the 6th day and fled the system. They had lost over half their number and gained nothing. It was the first time they had been defeated since emerging from dark space. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light travel should have allowed. Humanity had done the impossible. They had found a way to fight an enemy that adapted to everything. More importantly, they had shared their tactics with every species that fought beside them. Rachel stood on the bridge of the Defiant and received congratulations from 100 different sources. She ignored most of them and focused on the real work. Human fleets were already moving to other threatened systems. They did not operate under Council command. They coordinated with local forces as equals and shared everything they learned. Every battle against the Devourers became a teaching opportunity. Every species learned how humans approached warfare and adapted those lessons to their own strengths. The Council met on Kepler-7, and Kate Morrison entered the chamber for the first time in 2 years. She did not take humanity's old seat in the back. She walked to the center of the floor where every species could see her clearly. The chamber was full and silent as she spoke. Humanity came back not because we had to, but because we chose to. We do not want your thanks or your apologies. We want the galaxy to understand that strength comes from cooperation between equals. Every species has value regardless of their size or power. That is the lesson we tried to teach by leaving. Now we teach it by returning. The reforms came quickly because desperation made people willing to change. The council was restructured with equal representation for every species. Human innovations in warfare and medicine and technology were shared freely, but so was knowledge from every other culture. Peter Walsh returned to work on the trade network with a team of programmers from 20 different species. They rebuilt the system together and made it stronger than before. Nicole Grant flew her cargo ship again, but now she trained captains from other species in the logistics that made civilization possible. The war against the Devourers continued for 3 more years, but the galaxy faced it united in ways that had never existed before. Humanity did not lead the fight. They fought alongside everyone else, and each species contributed what made them unique. The Vryn had manufacturing capacity. The Thanari had resources. The Centauri had intelligence networks. Humans had adaptability and the willingness to try new approaches. Together they were stronger than any of them could be alone. Kate Morrison retired again to her ranch in Colorado after seeing the reforms implemented. President Cole visited her one evening and they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "Do you think it will last? Do you think they really learned?" Kate was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Some learned and some will need reminding. But the galaxy is different now. Every species saw what happened when they treated others as inferior. They saw their civilization collapse. They saw themselves facing extinction. Most importantly, they saw that humans helped anyway, despite having every reason not to. That kind of lesson changes people." Cole nodded slowly. "And if they forget, then we remind them again. But I do not think they will forget. They know now that humanity does not need the galaxy. The galaxy needs us. More than that, they know every species is essential. Remove any piece and the whole structure falls apart. That is the real lesson. We just happened to be the piece that had to leave to prove it." High above Earth, the Defiant maintained its position, coordinating with defense forces from 100 species. Rachel Green watched the patrol routes and felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. The galaxy was healing and learning and growing. Humanity had forced the greatest transformation in galactic history by the simple act of walking away. Now they had returned and everything was different. The stars belonged to everyone and everyone knew it. That made all the difference.